Well, there's something about today's gospel story that I find really reassuring. No one gets the resurrection more wrong than Thomas. As my colleague Mike Angel puts it, Thomas is all of us. All of our skepticism, all of our mistake-making humanity. Now, more than that, when the disciples tell him that Jesus had just been there and he missed it, you really have to start to wonder if these guys at one time had played some practical jokes on Thomas. Because his reaction was, Jesus has been here? Yeah, whatever you say. After all, the resurrection is unbelievable if you think about it. And this bunch has been hiding even before Jesus was taken to Calvary. And then just as Thomas is standing there making his statement, unless I see the marks of the nails in his hands and put my fingers into the nails and my hand into his side, I will not believe. Just then, Jesus appears in front of him. Oops. Big mistake. And I have to say, that's why if you, with your fallible humanity, are going to make mistakes, as we all do, you might as well make a big one. Thomas is the one that lets us know that even Jesus' disciples, who founded the church, were as imperfect as we are. The bigger the mistake, the more we learn from him. What does Jesus offer to the mistaken Judas to set him straight? He offers him his scars, his battle scars, the wounds that were made in his battle with the errors of hatred and the stupidity of humanity. Something occurred to me the other day that strikes me as odd. And so here's a question for you all. If God is so powerful over death and all, why didn't God close up and heal the wounds on Jesus? Surely God could have. I think the reason is we learn our most unforgettable lessons from recalling the scars made by the errors we make in our lives. Jesus was showing Thomas the errors of humanity's ways, writ large on every portion of his crucified body. Scars for our mistakes. Now, the interesting thing is, as human beings, we start very early misperceiving the world around us. I especially love the mistakes that little kids make with prayers. And one of my colleagues started listening to his 4-year-old daughter as her version of the Lord's Prayer as she said it one day. And he heard a whole different set of words he'd never heard before. So, because what she said, it was probably stuff that she'd heard on TV and commercials. So she would say, "Give us this steak, our daily bread, and forgive us our mattresses." Another 3-year-old boy that was in his congregation prayed this. He said, "Our Father who does art in heaven, Harold is his name," and finished out the prayer with, "And lead us not into temptation." And children know a thing or two about that last thing. So you see, we humans really start out very early trying to make sense of what's familiar around us. And when it doesn't fit, they kind of force it into the space with stuff that they already know. Sometimes, we learn in this gospel, seeing is not the only way to be believing. The resulting mistakes can be kind of cringeworthy. I share a few of them this morning. I'm sure all of us have been mistaken about somebody's identity when we run into them in some public place. Something about running into someone you know from someplace else at Stop and Shop and you can't figure out where you know them from, that kind of thing. Well, this one's a little more egregious. Trip Lee, who was quoted in the book, Who is Jesus?, tells about the time he was with his best friend from high school at a party. And he said, "We saw our friend Nicole standing in the corner having a good time. We had spent the time with Nicole and her pregnant friend the day before. So we decided to walk over and greet them. My best friend said, 'Hey,' to Nicole, and then he rubbed her friend's belly with a kind smile and thoughtfully asked, 'How's the baby?' The only problem was this was a different friend, and she wasn't the least bit pregnant." Most men know better than to do that with pregnant ladies. So pastors can make their own cringe-worthy mistakes too. And this one's a whopper that I'm going to share with you. Back before I was a pastor, we had just moved into our present home, and it was September of 1985. And if you remember, September 27th, 1985, was the day that we got Hurricane Gloria. If you remember the damage from Gloria, it really hit this area very badly. My convent school 20th high school reunion was to be the next day in Syracuse. So with that nasty storm, it really slammed into the area. But I was determined to make it to the reunion, especially since I'd arranged with my cousin, Francis Patrick Murphy, to stay overnight at his camp on Skinny Atlas Lake. That's where all of our families from that area. And so we left after the storm, dodging debris. It took us 4 hours just to get to the place where you turn off Route 81 to go north into the Finger Lakes. So we stopped and asked a local farmer for a shortcut. And he gave us a shortcut that ended up taking us across a dirt road in a cornfield. Finally, we came up to the side of the Skinny Atlas Lake. And it just made us much, much later. The rehearsal was, the reunion was starting at 6. But now it was like 5 o'clock. And I told Pat that I was going to be at his camp by 5. And Pat had said, "Fine, but just know that if you're late, I have to go to a meeting about the same time, so I'll leave the door to the camp open for you. And oh, by the way, the camp may look different from you from the last time you were here because we just renovated the insides." Now, after driving 5 hours nonstop, I needed any bathroom, pronto. Finally, we made it up to fire marker 23, which is the dirt path down to Pat's cabin. I saw the cluster of cabins, but all I wanted to do was get inside the door of the bathroom. And it was 5:15. Pat wasn't there. I ran up to the cabin. The door was open, but the screen door was latched by a hook and eye, so I just easily flipped that and quickly ran into the bathroom. We threw our bags in the bedroom and headed off to the class reunion. It was a lovely evening, and we got back to Pat's cabin about 11 p.m. But he wasn't home yet, so we got ready for bed. Now, I thought it was odd because he's such a good host that the sheets sets for the beds weren't on the bed, they were stacked on the bed. So we made the beds, put on my nightgown, and went to sit in the living room to wait for Pat. And there were quite a few magazines all over the coffee table, so I began to read. And as I read, I moved a stack of magazines, and what I saw under those magazines made my blood run cold. It was a Bible. Now, my cousin is an avowed atheist, and who used to call himself the Reformed Druid, to give you an idea of how much he would be likely to have a Bible. I had that chill. So I looked at the wall for some of his collection of Irish memorabilia, which he always had up there, and instead I saw 2 cross candy bottles on the wall. And then I went to the magazines and I looked for the label, address label on the magazine, and it was a long Italian name. Then I knew we had broken into somebody else's house. I grabbed Gary and the suitcases, and it turns out Cousin Pat, whose cabin was right next door, had been watching us but thought we were the adult children of the 2 people that owned the place. So he helped us gather up everything and move our things, and the first thing in the morning, Pat gave the owners a call. A nice born-again couple who thought my breaking and entering was extremely funny, thank God. By the next day, the story of Cousin Pat's dumb relatives had gone all the way around the lake. My big mistake was assuming the difference I saw about Pat's cabin were the alterations, and then ignoring the red flag of the door being latched by forcing it to fit my own narrative. Yeah, you sure don't forget big mistakes like this. We tend to operate in our world of today according to seeing is believing. But Jesus made it very clear to Thomas that day that he wanted another kind of sight from him. Thomas couldn't see because Thomas believed dead is dead, period. But as Reverend Peter Marty says, the Church of the Resurrected Jesus Christ is founded on a complete reversal of this doctrine of seeing is believing. Now it is believing is seeing. And not the other way around. Jesus tells Thomas that those who find a way to trust in him without the privilege of seeing him, these are the ones who are blessed. Believing in another actually creates a form of sight or perception. No wonder Jesus had quite an affection for people who were blind. This is extremely valuable news for all of us to absorb and use in our own lives, because that means that we are no longer in 2023 at a disadvantage from these first century disciples who got to actually walk the dusty roads with Jesus. Believing in Jesus in our own way and time is the path for seeing him. I invite you this morning to think about the big mistakes in your own life. Was it a relationship? A job you thought was ideal? An opinion about people, perhaps even a prejudice for people who are different from you that turned out to be false? A lack of vision for the future? Whatever it is, Jesus gets it and loves you anyway. Loves you anyway for being human because he is too. Jesus is human too. He shows you his scars so that you can believe through faith too. Amen. So, we come to the end of this low Sunday, this quiet Sunday after Easter. And yet you can feel what it's all about. You can feel what Jesus was saying to you, that blessed are those who believe and not see, because we find Jesus everywhere here. We find Jesus' hands at the ends of our wrists. And I'll encourage you for one thing, which I usually don't do. The whole vote for the homeless shelter at Super 8 is coming up. There was a lot of contention about this. And you know that Bob Botello and Ari Rosenberg head the homeless committee. It was bitter, and it was so sad because it seems that too many people don't understand that these are our brothers and sisters too. These are our brothers and sisters too. So when you go and vote on this, I want to encourage you to remember those are your brothers and sisters too. May God bless you all this week. May God bring you to a point of peace and joy that is contagious to others. May God give you rest, and may God turn your vision to the beautiful, blooming world around us that's resurrecting life again here at the church. Amen.